I untied and pushed off toward the river. The water was high from the rain. Dry ground was rare here, and the effect of the omnipresent water gave one a constant sense of floating. My shoulders and arms began to loosen after 10 minutes of easy paddling. By the time I reached the open water, I was ready to grind. Billy had spent an hour on the phone explaining in his thorough and efficient way why he was making an uncharacteristic call for help. Billy is the most intelligent person I've ever met. A child chess prodigy from the North Philadelphia ghetto, he graduated top of his class at Temple's Law School. He then took a second degree in business at Wharton. He was an intellectually gifted black kid who grew up in one of the most depressed and depressing areas of the country. I was an unambitious son of a cop who grew up in the ethnic blue-collar neighborhoods of South Philly. Our mothers had met and formed a quiet and unusual friendship, one that we had only begun to decipher as men. We did not meet until we made contact on new ground in South Florida, where for our own reasons both of us had fled. I learned early to trust Billy. I also learned to listen carefully to his advice and his stories. He rarely said anything that wasn't thought out and worthy. I had kept that in mind last night as he spun through his reason for calling, and I worked through the pot of coffee. You know it was Henry Flagler, Rockefeller's Standard Oil partner, who brought the first train down into South Florida? No, but I do now, I said. Go on. It was Flagler who pushed his tracks down the east coast to Palm Beach, where he built the largest winter resort in the world at the time for the rich and powerful New Yorkers like himself. Tough old guy, Billy said, and pretty ballsy, too. There was reverence in his voice when he told how Flagler then took his rail line to Miami, when it was just a fishing town, and then took on the superhuman task of building the overseas rail line from island to island all the way to Key West. Some of this history I knew. Billy had been my lending library, passing on books about Florida's past, Audubon guides when I stared dumbly at a species I didn't know, and maps to give me a larger idea of where I was. He rarely gave tutorials, but this felt different. My friend was a lawyer. He was building a case. Flagler employed thousands of Southern blacks, free men who left their birth homes in Georgia and Alabama to hack his trail down the coast. They were the ones who piled the sand and gravel for a roadbed and then laid the ties and rails to carry Flagler's class to the sunshine. But better work than trying to scratch out the sand where they had been, I offered. Agreed, said Billy. They weren't forced, and they weren't stupid. But Flagler was also a businessman. He knew that dead-heading empty trains back north wasn't profitable, so he encouraged and often subsidized farmers to grow citrus and winter vegetables on the land west of his tracks. So he could fill the empty trains going back north and make a buck selling oranges in the winter, I said. Exactly. And once the rails were down, many of the black workers stayed and went to the fields to harvest that fruit and those winter vegetables. For generations, those families would be the muscled backbone for a thriving agricultural industry. It was not, we both knew, unlike the working core of North Philadelphia's factories and machine shops that once built thriving neighborhoods there. By the 1940s, stable communities were set west of Flagler's tracks, Billy went on. And entrepreneurial women started small businesses, stores, and restaurants that created an internal economy. Billy's command of the facts was always solid, his telling of the stories always eloquent, especially over the phone, when he felt most comfortable. But deep into my fourth cup of coffee, I finally interrupted him. Wonderful history, Billy, and I appreciate your constant efforts to educate me, but your point is? He waited a few studied beats. The matriarchs, the ones who were forward-thinking and looked to guide and care for their family's future, he said, hesitating, letting the leading question hang. Yes. I think they are being killed. I paddled for more than an hour east and south toward the sea. The river water had turned a dull blue-green, and its banks changed from the low tangle of mangroves to sandy banks sprouting skinny pines.